All right, it's Joe, and I'm Bob. Origin HiFi. Joe is one of the main guys here. His background is audio engineering and music. You played in bands and things like that. You know music, you know gear, you know what makes it work, what makes it good. And today, I thought that we would talk a little bit about turntables because I want to know more about more expensive, more high-end turntables and what separates them from I don't know, the $500 to like $1,000 turntables that people usually jump in
Yeah.
in the game with. Sometimes it's even less than that. Sometimes you're hitting a $300 price point. But I want to just kind of dig into what you're really paying for when you have something like this, a Dr. Feickert, which is, I believe, from Germany. Is that correct?
Yep. This is a $4,500 turntable with the
Okay.
Origin live Tonearm. Just it by itself is $3,500, so this is another $1,000. So this Tonearm is as much as those entry-level tables, right?
Just the Tonearm, yeah, sure.
And when you're talking about turntables, it's a mechanical device.
Mm-hmm.
All the sound comes from your stylus writing in the groove of a record. So as much noise as you can eliminate, the better.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. So principle one is really easy, is creating mass.
This is very heavy. We'll talk about the weight. I mean,
with a nicer turntable, you're going to get this huge solid plinth of, it's a walnut plinth.
Actual wood.
Actual wood. It's, very, very substantial, very heavy. So it's going to eliminate a lot of those resonances that would want to come into either the Tonearm or the surface of the record. Next thing would be your platter, which in this case is a huge piece of milled metal.
This shocked me when I picked it up, when we were cleaning it off and dusting it off for the video, and I lifted up is it solid?
Yeah, 100%.
And it must weigh more than 10 pounds.
It probably weighs right about 10 pounds.
And that always fascinates me, that with a belt drive, and we'll talk about belt drive over direct, especially on a high-end turntable. I would think that direct drive might rule the day, but in this case we have belt drive. So the weight of the platter really doesn't matter when it comes to driving.
That's where the third thing comes in, which is the bearing.
Okay.
And when you talk about just with anything, a really good bearing, you're trying to create zero friction. And as you can see with this platter, if I move it, it's not going to stop.
Right.
It'll probably go for 10 minutes.
So what is that, Newton's law? Was that Newton's law?
Yeah, that's mass.
Whatever's in motion stays in motion.
So you have this potential energy, this rotational energy. So being that this is really hard to start, that's going to be where the motor comes in, right?
Okay.
The hardest part of this is starting it.
Do you start it yourself? Sometimes I'll find myself.
A lot of people do. Certain turntables you have to. I give it maybe a little bit, but my thing is I don't start and stop it when I'm changing records.
Okay.
I just let it go, because obviously when it's going, there's a lot less stress on the motor. But this goes into why you need a good motor. You want a motor with high torque. It helps, for one, get the inertia going, but it also helps control the speed once it's going. Now, the high mass in this, obviously, you get less vibrations to the surface of the record. You also get this better inertia, which also helps stabilize the speed.
Yeah, constant.
Right? So once it's going, this is not hard to move, so it's going to keep the speed really, really well. So those are like the three main things. So it would be like mass, eliminating the resonance, your mass again, and that's rotational and just mass, and then your bearing system.
So is there a single bearing there? And I know there's two, I can't explain it, but from what I've read and what I've learned, there's two different kinds of spindles or whatever. What do you call this here? Is this the spindle?
That's a spindle, for all intents and purposes.
You can put bearings in different places. There's some inverted, and some are, right
and
side up.
Goes to whatever the manufacturer has deemed.
Is it a single bearing, or is there a series of bearings?
This is a single bearing.
That's important.
Very small little bearing right in the middle where the yoke hits.
And minimum friction. The minimum of friction.
And obviously there's always oil in these too, and there's such a tight tolerance, sideways, that bearing is always getting perfect pressure.
Right.
And there are some with multiple bearings. There's an inverted bearing. There's some companies that use magnets to really just float the platter.
Right.
So there is no friction, theoretically no friction.
Now this comes with a very very thick rubber mat. Where are you on mats? I've had everything from cork to felt to rubber.
Yeah.
I know this will. I don't think
cork and leather are my favorite. But it's then again it goes to the manufacturer. This is a pretty standard rubber. There's certain companies project on their high end. They actually melt down vinyl records, or it's the same composite that a vinyl record's made out of.
Okay.
And it's not removable.
So that's more of a. I know I have a turntable that's the platter's made. It's of course a lot lighter than this. It's made of Delrin, I think, is the thing.
So
but
the whole idea is that you're matching the mass, or you're matching the consistency of the vinyl.
You're bonding everything almost.
You're bonding almost everything together.
Right.
Other than that, like aftermarket, I love cork or leather. I think cork and mainly, cork has a really good anti-static properties.
Okay.
Leather's pretty good once it doesn't have any static on it. But I like they're grippier as well, so your record, like I run a project at home and that it can slide around on that. If you don't use your weight, it can slide around on that kind of plasticky, vinyl-y surface,
I was shocked that when I tapped this, how dead it is even without the rubber mat. Now the rubber mat helps it even more, but that is
absolutely
no
ping. Sound, no resonance, and so the whole idea is that anything that happens through that will transfer to this, which then transfers to the arm. Same thing from the arm. Anything, generally you can catch some noise if you're going to tap on the head shell and it's plugged into a stereo system. It's super sensitive. We're running an MM cartridge here. It takes about 50 decibels of gain. That is a lot of gain, right? You go to an MC and you're going to be pumping 50 to maybe 70 dB a gain. That's a lot of gain coming through this whole section right here.
Yeah.
So is anything you can do to eliminate noise anywhere is going to go a long way. And then we're talking about getting into the blacks of our music. And generally what people hear, the difference between like a turntable like this and say, a $500 turntable, even if we had the same cartridge on it, is it's just going to be more immersive. The blacks are going to be blacker. You're going to have more depth because
what about groove noise and things like that? That's the one thing that irritates me the most about playing vinyl. As much as I love it and it's my main choice when it comes to listening to music, I've always had vinyl, always loved vinyl, but it just sometimes that groove noise just gets in my head, and it's usually just the beginning. It's just the lead in. It's just the run in or the 100%. Run out, which isn't even the music.
It's not, and it's funny because I'll buy a new record and I'll get it home and it'll hit that first part and I'm like, that's the only thing I can think about. It's like it's brand new. It's brand new. But once it hits
once the music starts,
it's quiet. Now I have bought new records recently. You got to know where to shop for vinyl. Yeah. That's a huge thing. I have bought new records
a relationship
that have surface noise, they have groove noise the whole way. They're just a bad pressing.
So let me ask you about the cable, and we'll come back real quick to the drive system, and then finally the tone arm and some of the things that are going on here. And again, we're talking about higher end turntables like this Dr. Feickert, and we have many different types of turntables here at Origin. But people ask me all the time about the length of the phono cable. These generally should be the shorter the better, right? Because
back to the gain thing, right?
Okay.
If I'm having to gain this whole thing up 60 dB, this has to be super short. These are going to be inherently pick up RF. It's a single ended with a ground, so you're making this quasi balanced thing.
Okay.
It's not truly balanced though. It's single ended. Anybody in audio, if you're looking at this video, if you're looking at this turntable, you probably know this is an inherently noisy cable.
Okay.
At this length, it's not terrible, but when you're talking about giving it that much gain, if it's between a CD player and an integrated amp or a CD player and a preamp, the voltage is totally different. There's not a lot of gain being introduced. These things are perfectly fine. When you're talking about this shortest length possible and you let that phono preamp gain it up, really good.
Wait a minute. This doesn't have Bluetooth or a built-in phono preamp.
Not at this
Come
level.
on, man.
So that's the first thing. You lose a couple things. Believe it or not, Bob. When when you
I was
step
looking
up,
there were no switches
the
on the back.
first things you lose are built-in speakers.
Right.
The next thing,
Wait a minute. I'm not even getting.
The
All
next
right.
thing you lose is Bluetooth streaming,
Okay.
both ways, all that kind of stuff. This is a pure analog. It's a mechanical unit,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
So leave everything, even these wires out of it. You take the tone arm out. These wires are actually connected directly to the tone arm. That's another high-end feature. There's no other set of RCAs here for connection errors or anything. This is leads go straight to the head shell. But this is an inherently mechanical unit. If you take this off, it's a motor that runs this.
Okay.
Right? You put this on, now this is essentially kind of my reader, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing about a high-end turntable is this arm board right here, I can put different arms on it.
Okay.
You know, whereas a lot of, especially at your
You can. I'm not going to, but
well,
you
yeah,
can.
at your entry level, you're
Right.
definitely, there's no arm. You get what you get. It's an all-in-one thing. So this could be upgraded. But yeah, I mean, your phono preamp you want is close to this. There's some companies doing some balanced outputs straight off straight off the head shell now, which is, it's trying to counter that a little bit, and it's just all they're trying to do is help eliminate that noise.
So
is so much gain.
Does belt drive say more high end than say direct drive?
The difference is,
I know there's isolation
direct
properties.
drive is going to be pitch perfect, right? Belt drive is going to have wow and flutter. I think even at the highest level, it's going to have some wow and flutter. Now, if you keep it in a tolerable area, there's not going to be any noticeable thing unless you're playing your guitar with a track or something and you'd be like, hey, it's a little out of tune. Just a tiny bit. You go to direct drive, that doesn't happen. It's constantly, that servo is constantly monitoring what's going on. The difference being that direct drive is directly coupled to the platter.
Could direct drive start this very heavy platter? Is that why?
It could, but then your direct drive, the motor is coupled to the platter. So that in an audiophile, you know, landscape doesn't make sense. I've got something that's inherently noisy, my motor directly on the thing that I'm trying to eliminate noise from. In certain settings, it doesn't matter. And really, for most people, you're not going to probably have a system that's revealing enough to really tell that apart. But it goes to that audiophile journey, like we're looking for that perfection, you know, or at least the 99%. And so the idea is that the motor stays away. Anything that will generate noise stays away from the thing that we're trying to get noise off of.
So going to the tone arm now and the tone arm assembly and the pivot and all that stuff, we'll start with the tone arm itself. Even in mid-fi, it seems like carbon fiber is all the rage.
Carbon fiber is great.
What do we have here?
This is actually a stamped steel.
But very low mass, I'm assuming?
Very low mass, very rigid. That's the whole idea behind the carbon fiber, right? It's very low mass and it's very rigid. This is a little bit higher quality than, say, you know, like we said, this is a $1,000 tone arm. The idea is that it's milled for perfection. Also, yeah, I mean, the whole idea behind a tone arm is that it shouldn't have a lot of mass because we have to balance it out to where we just want a certain amount of weight down on
under
that cartridge.
2 grams.
Yep, and depending on the manufacturer once again, but yeah, that's not a lot.
Right.
If you've ever set up a table, you know, you can get it to float to where it has no weight on the end, and then it's just a tiny bit to get to 2 grams. It's a tiny bit. So just your adjustability. So that this needs to be very rigid and low mass. Same sort of deal. You want it to be fairly unresonant, which is another benefit of carbon fiber. It's not going to have any resonance.
Just more engineering than you're going to get in what I call a mid-fi. I don't mean to insult, but I consider myself a mid-fi person.
We've both had those tables. I had a great $500 table that lasted me 10 years. Your next thing is going to be the pivot, you know, wherever the mount is. Basically,
is there bearings involved here?
Yep, the bearing system on the pivot. And that just allows it to track properly. You want it very free. Most arms are going to have some sort of anti-skate, whether it's a dial, it's a piece that hangs off, and that just helps the arm stay very much in the groove.
Yeah, I get obsessed with anti-skate because I don't trust the dials. A lot of tables have the dial. I'll literally get like an old laser disc or a plastic, just a flat plastic platter, and put it on there and put the needle on to see if it's going toward
Yeah,
the
once it
spindle
has weight,
or away, and it's not always the same number that I'm dialing in.
it's not, and you'll find sometimes, I mean, this is, once again, it's a very mechanical thing. Sometimes you're at the limits of what the mechanics can do. I've set up multiple turntables where it has the dial. The dial's not my favorite either.
Right, that's a
I don't
spring.
feel like
that's
it
a
works
spring
as
process,
well.
right?
Exactly. Yeah. And there's plenty of times where I have it dialed all the way out.
So,
and it's like, it doesn't seem like that's where you would want it, but that's the way it works.
If you're at that level and you want to measure that, there are ways to do it and get it a little more accurate.
Test discs are great. There's a couple of discs that you put it in the groove, and when you're sitting in the image, or if you have an oscilloscope, you can see what's happening on both sides. And if you're tracking, if your arm's trying to skate, you'll generally have more left or right of the track, you know.
And at this level, I'm going to assume we have not only vertical tracking force, which is the amount of pressure that the needle is putting on the record or whatever, but you're going to have vertical tracking angle. Yep. You're going to be able, so the height of this whole assembly can come up and down at this level, right? Not every 100%. Turntable will have that. And what about azimuth? Can we adjust the
100%?
The azimuth is the cartridge. Is it perfectly level?
Yeah, and that goes to skating too. You know, I mean, and so setting up a turntable, there's all those variables, right? And you change one, and it generally changes the other one. So it's a lot of just changing something, going back, starting at step 2. Getting to step 5, going back to step 3, you know, and you just kind of do this revolving thing until it works properly.
Cartridge is going to be personal preference. We have a Sumiko here,
Amethyst.
Amethyst.
Yeah, it's the top of the line moving magnet that they make.
That's going to be a matter of preference to people's taste and things like that, and budget. But generally, what would you say would be a good ratio? Well, you got a $5,000 turntable.
$1,000,
so
$1,500. You know, you generally, obviously, I would say if you're starting out in this, spend your money on the deck.
And then
buy a little
upgrade
bit
later.
Yeah, because this is still going to play, right? You're still going to get to enjoy. You're going to get to start using the expensive medium that you bought.
Right.
You can continue buying expensive medium. Then when you get used to that, that's your next upgrade path, and then this is your backup for when the cleaning lady comes and swipes it, and you know, you have a backup, so you're never down. So this is always, the cartridge is, once the bad's out of the way, which is creating the mass, creating, you know, the nice, you know, centrifugal force, letting the motor do its work, having a nice bearing system here to where it tracks. The cartridge is your next thing. Cartridge and phono preamp, and there's a synergy with that. That's for a whole other video.
It's a whole.
That's like your
thing,
amp and speaker synergy, and that's where a lot of the next part of the sound comes out.
Right.
But like really getting into something that's made well, that you're never going to have any problems. This is a $3,500 table without an arm. I could put a $5,000 arm on here, and it would be worth it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's why you buy something that is inherently...
It's like anything else, a foundation of a house or something. You know, it's a foundation.
Great word for it.
So the feet, a 3-point?
3-point, yep.
And these are spiked feet. Obviously, they're going, one of them or more is going to be adjustable.
Yep, all 3 of them are on this unit.
And there's an advantage to 3 feet, the less contact, right?
Less contact and way easier to level.
Okay.
Think about it, if you got 4, you're always chasing 1. If you have 3, it's a real easy adjustment.
All right.
You know, to get it level, and once again, less contact, less resonance is coming into the table.
Thanks for all that information. I think, I'm still Mr. $1,500 and below turntable guy, but someday when I get my big boy turntable, I might get a Dr. Feickert here from Origin HiFi. This has been Joe. You're super knowledgeable. Every time I talk to you about audio, I learn so much. My name's Bob. I have a channel called United States of Analog. I don't get as deep into some of the gear as we got today, but if you want to check that out, you want to see more of my videos, I have a lot of videos about starter turntables and things like that. But any way you do it, just do it. Get into vinyl. It's so rewarding. It can be extremely frustrating. I think Joe would echo that.
100%. I think most things in life that
things that are worth it are marriages, relationships. They're all frustrating until you get the hang of it.
Yep.
But If you're not comfortable with something like this, come in, look at a turntable that's maybe a little more in your budget. It takes practice. It takes patience. It takes, you know, it's that's what's so rewarding about it. It's putting the time in and putting in the work, and then when you finally sit down, and if the music's really good, you're not even thinking about any of this. You're just listening to the music, and I think that's the ultimate goal.
It is.
Of the
It is,
turntable.
and there's a tangibility to it, but it is being able to put it on, then sitting back and enjoying what is created there. Also, just finding gems.
Yeah.
That come out.
Yeah.
You know, it's the whole vinyl hunt is fun.
Yeah,
you know?
it is. Well, thank you, man. Always
My
learn a
pleasure,
lot
my
when I
pleasure,
talk
Bob.
to you.
Good hanging with you.
We'll see you next time from Origin HiFi.